I will just start by introducing myself. So my name is Lindsay Warren, and I created the Mindful Living movement to just share my passion for yoga, for gardening, for mindfulness. And gardening is just one of those things that kind of pulls everything together. It just brings you into such presence, and probably why my house is now filled with plants, and eventually my yard will be once we can get outside. But today I wanted to talk about specifically sun charts, and the reason that this is like the most important thing that you could possibly know about your yard, about your windows, in your house. If you don't know what you are getting for sunlight, if you have trees, buildings, fences, whatever in the way, it's really, really hard to know what's going to be successful growing in the space that you have. And it took, I think it was actually going into my third growing season before I read an article that talked about making a sun chart of your yard, and read what it was, and I was like, oh my God, this is so easy. And it literally blew my mind because I hadn't heard of doing that before. And so once I created a sun chart of all of my growing space and places that I wasn't growing as well, I learned a lot of things about my yard. What I thought was not correct. Like, it was like, I think this gets lots of sun, I think that is all shade, and until you actually take notes of what's really happening, you really aren't gonna know. So what a sun chart is pretty simple. You're gonna make a really cute little picture of your yard, and I'll show you guys mine in a minute here. But basically you need some paper, you need some colored pens, and probably just something plain black. Now, my chart, I use just plain black to map out, this is patios, fences, trees, hedges, all that kind of stuff, plain black. And then as I start marking how the sun moves, that's where the colors and stuff come in. So it makes it easy for me to see what's happening. So that when I look back a year or two, however many years later, I can go, oh yeah, okay, this makes perfect sense. So once you have those supplies, you need a sunny day. And really, yeah, just sunshine. Start as soon as you can, as soon as the sun comes up in the morning, which I know can be a little bit challenging. But start as soon as the sun comes up in the morning, right until the sun goes down at the end of the day. And every hour, go out there with your chart where you've drawn out, what is what, and make little circles or dots, or however you can delineate what is shade and what is sun. The way that I do it is I mark out what is shaded specifically, and then that just means everything else is sun. And I recommend, before I show you mine, I recommend probably a whole bunch of different pages. So I've probably got like 3 for my front yard. One is a morning, one is the afternoon, one is the evening, just so that it's clear. It doesn't have to be pretty, but it does need to be clear. You need to look back on it and go, oh yeah, okay, I know what this is trying to tell me. So this might look like a really big mess, but this is one of the parts of my backyard. And so you can see there's the big black sections. I've got marked off patio and different stuff like that. And this all makes sense to me, but you can see there's all these different little colored sections. So here's 3 big trees, and there you can kind of see the shade that they throw and sort of how it moves throughout this section of the day. And one of the things that I found was really handy was just to put like an arrow pointing, this is the shaded side, just so that things don't get confused too much. And so I can easily see, okay, at 4 p.m. there's all the blue, and track that way which time of the day is getting which part of sun, because the sun that's happening, right about high noon, that's your strongest sun, especially if it's coming, not being blocked by trees or anything like that. So that's just like one tiny little piece of my yard. And this one I think is a morning, actually. Yeah, so that one, just one little section. I've got a whole stack of them here, and some of them I've spilt water on and whatever, and I've had to redo. I also recommend doing them different times of the year. So you know, doing like early spring, doing midsummer, doing late fall, just because our sun does change so much. And also your trees fill in, so you know, early spring is going to be very different from midsummer when all your trees and your hedges are full. You're obviously going to have a lot more shade coming from, you know, that part of the season. Once the leaves drop, you're going to have more sun again coming through. So from the outside, it's pretty straightforward. Map out absolutely everything. Do your patio, do your fences, do your deck, do your grass, rocks, like absolutely everything, because you might discover that, okay, this little section I've put a bunch of rocks in, but actually maybe that's where I should be growing, you know, and until you decide to put a flower bed there, you could just stick some pots right on top of the rocks. Nothing says that you can't, you know, grow things even if there's not dirt sitting underneath, you know, your surface there. And then if you're gonna track indoors, because this applies just as much to inside your house as it does outside your house, is draw, you know, a little map of your house, marking north, east, south, west, so you know which windows are facing which direction. South obviously is your ideal growing space indoors, especially winters. We don't have a very intense sun here in the winter time. We also have a very short time frame that the sun is actually up. So for, you know, those like big tropical plants that like lots of sun, they're probably going to need those windows. If you're starting seedlings for your garden and you don't have any grow lights, that's probably where you're going to need to put them so that they get a really good strong start. But growing indoors is pretty easy. You don't have to track usually as much. Once you've kind of figured out which windows are going which direction, you'll know, okay, well, the sun's going to come up on this side of the house and it's going to set on that side. And where the sun comes up, you know, you're probably only going to have a limited time frame. 9 a.m. till 11 a.m. right now comes in this one window. And so you can make your notes that way. Also, just being careful to note where there might be a tree outside that window. So wherever there's a tree right now, there's no leaves on the trees, so we're getting a whole bunch of sun, but eventually those trees are going to be full, so you kind of want to take a note of that. There's also indoor plants that like more of a like diffused light. So, you know, if you're getting straight full sun and you've got no trees or anything blocking, fantastic for some plants, but the ones that like that diffused bright light, you're maybe going to need to put like a sheer curtain in front of. So this is just going to tell you what that window is actually going to give you and what kind of plants are going to be suited for, you know, those particular windows that you have. Yeah, so I think that's generally about it. The one thing to note, I was just checking my notes here, make sure I got it all. The one thing to note definitely is like even your south windows in the winter time, they're not going to be near what you're going to get for a south facing sun in the summertime. And right now, like for example, I had one tropical plant that normally spends in a different room where it gets bright but diffused light in the summertime. It wasn't getting near enough right now. It's just, we just don't have enough sun. So I moved it to one of my like brightest places, and it seems to be doing much better, but I know it's not going to be able to stay there once summer rolls around. So yeah, so that's making a sun chart. Super easy, but super, super important. And even if you have like a very wide open yard and you're really lucky that way, you know, still track your sun, because you might discover that maybe where you think the sun goes behind your house at one point in the day, maybe it doesn't go as quick, or maybe it goes quicker, and that might open up a little corner where you could grow, you know, differently over there. For me, a sun chart made the most massive difference because we have a ridiculous amount of trees, hedges, fences, house, garage, neighbors got a whole bunch of buildings along the one fence. And it makes things really challenging to figure out, okay, my ideal spaces, those things that really need good sun, where can I actually really put those? And this helped clarify, like, okay, now I actually understand. Like our sun sets behind our house too, so maybe like about 4 o'clock, I actually lose sun in a good portion of my garden. So, you know, that also helps me, okay, I got to push things a little bit farther to the one side so that they're the very last ones. Hopefully they get all the sun in the day. And yeah, it changed absolutely everything about how I plan my garden, the success of the things that I'm putting in my garden. You know, I don't have just a regular plot. I've got a whole bunch of flower beds running, you know, all over the place because I wanted to still have like a sort of traditional kind of urban yard. But still, I still have like a full garden. I've got, I don't know, I think I'm close to like 700 or 800 square feet of growing garden space, plus grass and trees and all the other work. So I've got a pretty good sized garden, but, you know, you wouldn't really notice until you're looking like super, super close. So that is how I make it work. So I hope that helps. Drop questions below if you're wondering, missing something. I'll show you just my chart one more time, just the one space. Now, take it with a grain of salt. It's kind of messy, but you know, plot out, just super easy. Doesn't have to be fancy. Those big main sections, here's, you know, 3 of those big trees I was talking about. This is a hedge. This is one of my garden beds. This is another one of my garden beds. This here also is a garden bed. This is all grass in the middle. So I just kind of know this is what my yard is. And then I've got, okay, this hedge throws shade. There's all the trees that throw shade. There's a big fence right here, so it starts to throw shade. And I've kind of delineated like solid lines mean like solid shade. Dotted lines are more like part sun, part shade is kind of how I've marked it. And I've tried to keep this, there's only about like 4 hours on this page just so that I can put a whole bunch of stuff all over the place and not be a super big disaster. So, you know, this section of my garden has like 3 different of these pages so that I can actually see realistically what's happening throughout the entire day. And yeah, so that's making a sun chart.